Has moved investors' money today, Caroline. That was Caroline Kremen from AdviceWorks. We shift focus now. The South African Institute of Taxation held its 12th Annual Tax Indaba, focused on navigating the country's spending debt trap. The Institute's CEO Keith Engel joined me to unpack some of the critical challenges policymakers face in a heated global and local political climate. Here are those insights.
Well, I think the issue is that we move from policy to administration. So the real issue is, and what's difficult in the Indaba is, there's stuff we can talk about as tax, but you can see that from several of the events, is that there are larger forces impacting the tax, right? The issue really is not so much tax, it's the expenditure that drives it. Okay. So that expenditure, I would love to have an expenditure Indaba. Not sure how to do that. We'd like it to be constructive, but having moved on to that, now the expenditure demands are so high, and you can see everybody's very careful to allude to it, is that what affects practitioners and the revenue service is the pressure for revenue. So the revenue service is a very strong pressure to get more revenue, to double, triple check, to check more, to be more vigorous. And there's a level of vigorousness that makes it difficult because at some point that vigorousness can be perceived as intrusiveness. And there's a desperate need for money. And it's a desperate need of money for the current taxpayers as well as the people who are missing. And that makes it a difficult environment because you've got to get the revenue. That's really where it happens at the end of the day. So, and the question is that sustainable? So what we said is, we're not going to get it from the VAT. We'll have Kieswetter or Johnston pick up the money. Well, at the end of the day, you're putting a lot of pressure on people. And that's going to, and look at the debt collection. Debt collection is another example. We say, okay, let's look at this debt. But if you listen to Johnston closely, as hard as he might, a lot of this debt may no longer be collectible. It might be legitimate, but that debt may be so old or the people simply unable to pay it, and yet they can't write it off. So what we're doing is pushing a little extra pressure on the system to the point where it's making a very tense environment. And so what our members are facing is far more verifications, far more audits. And sometimes they're being doubled and triple checked because that's what we need. And people say, there comes a point, man, you got to trust me a little. But in an environment where the revenue is becoming so desperate, that trust is falling out. And the second thing is the members are facing the reverse problem. A lot of people can't afford to pay. Yeah. So you see a growing number of people say, I owe the money, but I just can't pay you. Yeah. So you can set any rates you want, but economically, people need to feed their families, they need to go to work, they need to live in the house, they need to do the basics. We're at a stage in our economy now where, people aren't just giving up their vacations anymore and their luxuries. I don't know how you feel, but, when you're checking basic groceries, you didn't become a professional to worry whether I should go to one store or another.
Exactly. I actually read an article the other day that said Johannesburg is the most expensive city when it comes to groceries, and I can actually feel it. And actually, as we're talking about those pressures, you talk about the pressure on revenue, the pressure on expenditure. It's really pressure from all sides. At this point, what can you highlight then about our fiscal strategy? Is it reading the room?
Well, the fiscal strategy, to be honest with you, is quite good. I mean, even the VAT decision, well, a lot of people can object to it. If you're going to change a tax system and get the money you need, the most efficient and effective is the VAT. And the arguments about the poor, in my mind, are overstated. Ultimately, it hurts the middle class more. But be that as it may, the problem is that you're getting more and more desperate for revenue sources. So the only real avenue left is the revenue service. And revenue service, to be honest with you, is operating relatively well. Now, a lot of people like to say that the revenue service does this and they do that. Look, no revenue service is perfect. But if you look around the world, the revenue service there is much better than many. It really is. Yes, there are problems across the board, but the difficulty, what the government has decided is you can get it through using SARS. The problem is you're still pulling money out of the economy. Now you're pulling it for a fair group. The guy who's never paid, they're referring to the rich luxury guy living in the luxury state and it's missing. That, at least people are on board with emotionally. But still, you're taking more and more money, and money that we don't have. And that, when the cheese gets smaller, the rats start to fight. And even though I must say we have a bunch of friendly rats around, at the end of the day, the bottom line is the cheese is getting tighter. And we simply don't have the money. And the problem is the government itself, the other parts of the government are not coming to the party.
Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting note that you highlight, that when the cheese gets smaller, the rats start to fight. And we've seen a lot of fighting also on the political front, because things have changed. So what's your view on how the political dynamics then have shifted the budget and the budgetary process as well?
Well, I guess we're going to talk about it in here. The budgetary process is better, in a sense. Look, we had a good budget process. We always followed form, and I worked under some very good ministers where we really tried, when we issued legislation, we really listened and we really heard. There was a lot there. But the budget process itself has never been subject to interrogation. Until now. And the bottom line is many people disagree with how the money is spent and the amounts that are being spent. And there's a great frustration there. And a lot of times people are taking that on the revenue service. But now we have a budget process where for the first time it's going to be a bit accountable. And frankly, we should always have some multiple parties. No one party should be so dominant that they can just get what they want whenever they want. Whether it's the ANC, the DA, the EFF, once one party starts to operate in impunity, there's no more accountability. And that's the thing that this country is lacking, is our democracy accountable? Now, to be fair to South Africa, 25 years when I came, democracies were working better. And South Africa, we're trying to lift the democracies. Unfortunately, around the world, there's a growing concern our democracies are not accountable. But they have different problems of accountability. And unfortunately, there's an accountability problem on this expenditure, on this corruption side. And we just can't seem to get our voice heard. And unfortunately, the political dynamics are such that you have one narrow party and another narrow party now. And I'm very afraid that the middle isn't being heard.
And, I always say this, Keith, that in terms of taxpayer behavior, SARS is always talking about this, that, not everybody is forthcoming in terms of their tax responsibilities, and it's a culture that they're trying to change. But I always say that as a taxpayer, you are going to feel more comfortable and more proactive with your taxes if what you're seeing in terms of what the government is doing with your money, if you are satisfied with that. You spoke about expenditure pressures. Do we have the right priorities as the South African government in terms of where the SARS money is being spent?
Yeah, and I think that's where the big debate is. And the difficulty is there's a lack of trust, that there's a feeling that the narrow interests have taken over. So, we cannot continue on this trajectory of more and more spending. It's simply unsustainable. Yes, there might be a lot of good projects, but the economy can't handle it. And yes, the revenue service can find new pockets of revenue, and some of them are legit and we need to go after them. But there comes a point you're taking too much. We are very heavily taxed. Now, whatever you say is we have a very small base carrying a very large amount. And people like yourself, my question is, who's representing you? Who really is representing you? And the taxpayers, the middle class, we're talking about the middle, the lower middle, the working class is getting squeezed very hard. And government wants to do this, and it wants to do that, and wants to do these other things. Now, there are two issues there. One, should we do all these things? Do you want a state that does so much? Two, even if you do want it, are we capable? And then three, there's the corruption element. And so the concern that I had with the budget before, and I don't believe it's a problem with the Minister of Finance or with the Revenue Service. The Revenue Service and the Minister of Finance, for the last 25 years since I've been here, has consistently been trying to compensate for the weaknesses elsewhere in government. So this is a debate we'd have. I have many conferences, budget conferences, not ours, but different ones, where everybody's saying, look, the Treasury and the SARS are trying their damnedest, but the rest of government is simply not going along. And so this problem so now you say to yourself, well, if the rest of government is not going along, the Revenue Service can be as honest and as nice, and they're trying, and yes, they make mistakes, but at the end of the day, where's my money going to? I'm not happy. Now, there's always issues of unhappy in the United States. Well, I don't want your cause, you don't want my cause. But there's a growing feeling that this is nobody's cause. And this problem means then for the Revenue Service, well, yeah, I know that you're a nice guy, in Keyswetter and Johnston, you're good people, but you're still collecting for things I don't believe in. And two, I don't have the money. I don't have the money. And so, to some extent, you could say that, yeah, they're doing, people have to comply and all of that, and that's all the Revenue Service can do. But the rates are too high for the middle class and the lower middle. So if you're, the 45% rate really kicks in at a middle class level. It's not kicking, 45% should be kicking in 2.5 or 3 million. The second thing is we keep forgetting about the lower middle. Hitting them at 30 to 38, that's too much. If you look at people worrying, and then look at the fuel levy. I mean, people can see it in isolated ways. So now here you are, yeah, I know I have a legal obligation to pay it, but I'm trying to survive, and you're cutting into my lifetime money now. Now you're asking me to give up things for my children. You're now telling me, what am I supposed to do here? I'm not asking for a lot of luxuries. I've got rid of all these luxuries. I've streamlined as much as I can. How old can our clothes get? We go shopping for discounts wherever we go. There's a point that we need clothes. There's a point we need food. So what's happening is if there's a problem on government side, it's that expenditure side. And yes, on the private side, there are people who are playing games. I think most of the games are evasion now. I think there was some discussion about avoidance in earlier days. There's sophisticated lawyers doing this and that. And yes, there is still some of that at the high end. But frankly, most of those have been killed. The real issue is there are some who are doing outright evasion. It's outright. So if you're looking at the mass of the taxpayer problem, it's claiming deductions that are not business deductions. It's not reporting income. It's going off the system altogether. And so a lot of those issues are there. So there are some people, but the mass of the people, and I would say the mass of our Treasury and SARS colleagues, are really on the good side of the fence. In a sense, coming to this event is just an act of good faith on both parts. And it took us a while to get there, to get that good faith. And it did. And you can see now we're not throwing rocks at each other and all of this. But the problem is that when we go back home and somebody else does something wrong, everybody goes back to the fences and we're back to war again. But really, I do think that the bulk of South Africans really want to come to a middle ground. And then there's a certain set of people who don't want change, so they keep throwing rocks around as decoys, and that's just a very unfortunate thing. The one difficulty I would say for South Africans, because you can hear my American voice, I've been here 25 years. I am a South African citizen, and I appreciate that. I thank you so much for that. You guys are too nice. You're too nice. You put up with too much. And the bottom line is, somebody's got to be accountable at this point. We don't want them killed. We just want them to get out of the way.
That was Keith Engel, CEO of the South African Institute of Taxation. I do have your news making headlines at the top of the hour right after this.